All right, so I called the meeting to order at 9:30. Here's Michael. Well, Michael, can't see you yet, or here, there you are. So you're muted.
I was just saying it's sunny.
Yeah, that's great. It's kind of overcast here. Yeah, so my name is Nancy Vandell. I'm calling the meeting to order at 9:30. Welcome everybody. Welcome Susan, who's coming in from Sydney at 2:30 in the morning. So I'd like to go to the conflict of interest declarations. I have none that I know of.
I'm free and clear. No conflicts of interest.
I had Angelo here and I have none.
Bill Miller has none.
Tom, you're muted, Tom. I'm still not hearing you, but you're not muted, so I'm not sure what's going on. Testing 1, 2, 3. I think your microphone might be attached to something other than your headphones. So we'll wait for that. So approval of the previous minute. Hello. Oh, I think I heard. Are you there,
Yes.
Tom?
Okay, yes,
Okay,
you're
great.
right. It selected something else, just arbitrarily.
Yeah.
Anyway, I have no conflicts of interest.
Okay, great. Moving on to minutes, we have two versions of minutes to approve. We were sent the ones from the last meeting last night. Did everybody have a chance to read them? I can share the screen and put them up if you didn't.
I did.
I read them this morning.
Okay, any comments, any corrections or additions to the minutes?
I only have one,
last
and
meeting?
it's a typo, I think. It's in a paragraph that starts Bylaws Process Committee. And I think it should read section should be numbered ED instead of S.
I got that already. Thank you.
Okay. Other than that, they look great.
Okay, I thought they looked great. Anything else? Okay, hearing none, the minutes are approved. Thank you. And then Michael, you had in these minutes corrections to the previous minutes. Is that sufficient for people? Can we go ahead and approve those corrections that Michael made to the previous minutes without taking a look at them? I haven't seen them corrected. Any objections to that? And then we can just go ahead and post both sets of minutes on the website.
No objection here.
Okay.
No objection.
Hearing none, the previous minutes are approved as corrected as noted in this meeting's minutes. Okay, moving on. And thank you, Michael, for that. Since Michael had to go back to the video for part of this, so I appreciate that. And I hope your piano recital went well, Michael.
It did. It really did. There's a group of us elders, if you will, all of whom are accomplished pianists, either piano teachers or professors of music. And we get together once a month and we play for each other. And it's absolutely delightful. And it keeps us on our toes, or fingertips, as it were. And thank you for, and incidentally, that happens on Fridays, once a month. So I may be in.
Okay. Thank you. And whoever's clinking dishes, could you mute yourself, please? Okay, my report. I think we're on that now. We have a very busy agenda. I mean, I don't know how we're going to get through this in an hour and a half, which is an agenda item in the future. So think about toward the end, the possibility of extending our meetings to 2 hours, and we wouldn't necessarily have to use that full 2 hours, but we'll talk about that at the end of the meeting. So my report, we've all been extremely busy. I want to thank everybody for all the work you've been doing, and particularly Michael and Tom have been doing a ton of work on the process and the editorial changes, as you have seen from the different documents that are sent that I'll put up. As I try to share the screen, I hope I can do a better job this time. I have been spending quite a bit of time talking with various people, following up on the action items to me. One is the history of the NCAC bylaws. You all, can you hear me okay? There's quite a bit of noise around me. Okay. Some of the questions that came up were, how did these bylaws get started? How did, the format come up, and is it okay for us to be looking at changing the format, that kind of thing. So Jeff was really helpful. He put me in touch with Guy Sievert, who was the original NCAC chair and was on the original bylaws committee. And we had quite a long conversation. Interesting guy. Does anyone know Guy? He's still very active. He's going to be on the community plan committee, and he agreed to be a sounding board for us as we make our changes, and has a lot of historical knowledge about how these bylaws evolved. So his word was community is the key word here. Everything is surrounding the Nescoan community, and it's the NCAC was started, and all of the CACs were started as a result of Oregon coming up with Land Use Goal 1, which was calling for all districts and counties need to have a structure for citizen participation. So Nesco and Tillamook County looked at what would that process be, and I think, like some other counties in Oregon, came up with this community advisory committee process. I also talked with Sarah Absher about this. She said that the original CAC was Oceanside, and that it had been already had some kind of a community group, and it was converted into the first CAC with the first bylaws. And then CACs in Tillamook County kind of evolved over time from the 1990s, and Nescoan was third or fourth, somewhere in there. One of the things that Guy said was that Nescoan kind of took the lead when they did form, and the mission driven by Goal 1, they put in the mission a much broader scope of authority for the NCAC. Instead of just being a land use organization for Nescoan, it actually says that it represents the community for working with all related entities, federal, state, county, more than just land use, like ODOT, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, et cetera. And they said that's really come to be, and the county approved that they could have that. And other counties, other NCACs, or excuse me, other CACs did that as well. They adopted that as their mission statements. He said that they've actually used that over time. There was a sewer company issue that came up with sewer permits and that kind of thing, and they were able to use that mission as an implementation for that, as well as other things, development, riprap, other things besides just strictly land use. His message to us is that bylaws are really important, and they've had to rely on the bylaws a number of times over the years as different contentious issues have come up, and that we need to be clear about how we vote, what officer positions can do, et cetera. His feeling is that officers again, the emphasis is on community, and officers should be there to lead everything, but the community needs to have the authority and vote. So that's been kind of the direction all along. Sarah also agreed with that. So he also said that since its inception, there have been issues all along that the NCAC has tackled. And some of you may have been part of these. There was a development issue with a development going across the highway that NCAC got quite involved with. The riprap issue, apparently NCAC worked on coming up with what the community was going to do with riprap. Coastal overlay zone, which a number of us had watched over the last several years. And of course, most recently, the STR committee. So it was a helpful thing. And if anyone wants us to bring Guy in at some point to talk about the history, he's a very interesting person to talk to. I also then looked at other CAC bylaws because I think maybe it was Bill was wondering what they say. And I thought, great question. So I don't know if anyone else did, but I went in and looked at all the others on the Tillamook County website, and not all the CACs have bylaws. The ones that do, most of them are still in draft form from 2006. Very few of them actually have formal final bylaws. They all pretty much follow our format. And Guy said that the format was kind of evolved through the county, but he said it's not something that they feel a lot of ownership with. We should feel free to change the format however we see fit. And the structure, he said there's a lot of improvement and clarity that needs to be brought to the bylaws. And so he's very supportive of our efforts to do so. And then I talked with Sarah Absher, following up on a number of our questions, and just to touch base with her, talk to her about what we're thinking, and just get any feedback that she might have from a county perspective. And overall, she was just extremely positive about our approach. She liked the idea of our going to Robert's Rules of Order format if we decide to do that. She said we shouldn't feel constrained by that. She said we do need to keep in mind that it is a community organization. She said voting is one person, one vote. It doesn't matter if the person has multiple functions, like they might be an employee or a business owner and a resident or a renter or a trustee or whatever. And it also doesn't matter if there are 40 people who are part of a business or who own a home or whatever. One person, one vote. Really, there doesn't need to be a lot of work to verify that someone would be a member. The assumption really is if they're part of the Nescoan community in any way, they should be able to get a vote. And she said they're adamant about that. So,
But what do you mean by that? When
that means
one person, what if my wife and I own this house together?
then each of you
we
gets a
get
vote.
2 votes.
Correct. And if you're
And
part of a consortium that, like 5 families maybe that own a home and timeshare it, then each of those parties would be able to have a vote.
But what if each of those parties is a couple? Then could that be 10 votes?
Each person gets a vote.
Yeah, I think the principle is that the membership is of people, not property, or people, not businesses,
Right.
or people, not ownership. It's just people.
Right. And we do need to clarify that in the bylaws, because it's not clear that anyone over 18 that has anything within Nescoan would have a vote. So I don't think that's been clear. It wasn't clear, I don't think, for these recent elections. And so that needs to be clarified in the bylaws.
So if I have 3 kids that come down here that are over 18, then they all get a vote?
That would be my assumption. I mean, that's something that we could ask her, but because they don't own it, but they come. That's a good question, Bill. I think that would be a question for Sarah. If they don't actually own the property, they don't work there, would they have a vote? I don't know.
Nancy, I'm a little bit concerned about the Susan's statements about that.
You mean
there
Sarah?
has to be some basis for determining who's eligible to vote, particularly on matters that are somewhat critical to how Nescoan gets developed. And I mean, I can see contractors saying, my employees work in the village, they're entitled to vote. I'm entitled to vote.
Right.
And even though I have no stake in here other than a contract, I think we have to be a little bit more specific than Susan is
Sarah.
laying out here for us.
Sarah.
Sarah. Just want to make sure it's Sarah, not our Susan. So yeah, Sarah.
Thank you.
So yeah.
Sarah.
So
I'm sorry,
I
Susan.
think you make
No worries.
a good point, Wyatt. And I do think that's worth revisiting on exactly, is it, I guess when I think of employee, it would be someone who works at a permanent place within Nescoan, as opposed to someone who's coming in to do daily work outside like a contractor that's temporarily there. I think that warrants clarification. I agree with you. And also Bill's question about, would someone who has, say, grandchildren that are over 18 or children that don't actually own the home but come visit, would they have a vote? Would someone who's coming and staying in a motel for a month or renting a house for a month as a short-term kind of thing, would that constitute? So those are all really good points that I think we need to address. So thank you for those. So yes, so I think we err on the side of one person, one vote from that perspective. But I think we do need to be really, really clear in when we get to the membership portion of the bylaws and the voting portion of the bylaws to really spell all these things out. And then Sarah did say that she would be happy to be a sounding board for us as we go forward. She will pop into meetings occasionally, particularly if we'd like her to. Otherwise, we can take our questions through me to her, and she will be able to respond to like these specific things. And that's why it's so great that you guys are all on the committee, because you think of all these things. So it's not a settled thing. She really liked that we were going to be as transparent as we're being and open and getting community involvement. She liked that we were setting up a web page through Jeff, and that we were setting up a forum that we'll be talking about later today for people to be able to communicate with us in a structured way with any input on ideas for changes that they have and why, as well as comments on changes that we're proposing. So she was saying that's great. We just kind of briefly talked about the confusion about committees versus subcommittees, that the NCAC is a committee, so shouldn't we all be subcommittees? And she said, I've been thinking about that myself. She said, I really think that's true. Really, all the committees under the CAC should be subcommittees. So that would be something for us to think about when we get to that point. Michael had originally raised that when he was doing his minutes. Aren't we really a subcommittee? And in the bylaws, we're not, but we can make that happen so it's more logical. She suggested, I asked her if we needed to get approval first, if we end up deciding that we want to go with Robert's Rules of Order, which we haven't decided yet. It's a little later on the agenda. Do we need to get a formal bylaws approval through the county for that and bring it to the membership before we start doing actual amendments? And she said no. She said she didn't think that was critical. At the October 14th NCAC meeting, we should be able to just go over the structure, why we're suggesting it, should we decide to do that, and give some examples of why it's more clear in our minds, and ask if there are any concerns about that or any comments about that in the meeting. And then if there isn't, and she didn't think there probably would be, then we can just say, okay, hearing none, that's how we're going to be proceeding in the future. And you will see this mapping that Tom has already done, actually, as we go forward. And she said, then we can just focus on the amendments themselves. So that was kind of nice to hear, that we don't actually have to go through each step to the county. She said that that as we go forward and we are making changes, we need to document as much as possible on our webpage, and that each iteration we need to put up and keep up with a revision number. And I think Tom has already taken a stab at how we are going to do our revision numbering, and err on the side of having too much up there rather than too little, so that anyone who's interested can go in and look at what we're doing at any time and keep up. She also said we need to make sure that anyone who has a comment has their name attached to it, that they're not anonymous. This is a public forum, and that we need to, and that everything in the forums are public. That if we run into a conversation, say in the supermarket or something, and someone brings up something about the bylaws, we should ask them to go through the process and submit that formally. So that we have that. So just be as transparent as possible. She liked the direction we were taking. I talked to her about the bylaw amendment that had already been approved to increase the meeting to up to 7 members, and asked if we could go ahead and, since Susan has over 50% of the vote, have Mark just appoint her and ask if there are any concerns about that or just objections. And she said no. She said, with the current situation with NESCON, we need to be really, really careful and transparent. We need to hold another election. So I've talked to Mark about this, and Susan and I texted back and forth. I didn't want to have so that she had a heads up, but we'll just need to do the announcement of the bylaw change, 14 days in advance per the bylaws. So I've already talked to Jeff and Mark about that. We're going to post that here in the next few days. And also a notice of the election, and ask people to submit, just like we all did for the original election, to submit anyone who's interested, and then they'll hold another election for up to 1 to 2 positions. So, and that would be done immediately following the bylaws approval. So should the bylaws change not be approved, and it does require a 2/3 vote to approve, then the election would not be held. But assuming it goes through, then the election would be held immediately following that.
At the same meeting, you mean?
At the same meeting, right.
And
Mark and I did talk a little bit about whether it should be, the election would be at the next meeting, but I think we agreed that we should be able to do it all at the same time and not wait 2 more months.
And so we're changing it to between 5 and 7 with the addition of Susan. That would be 6. So are we having an election for 1 position?
It would be for up to 2. So if 2 people apply, we could end up having 2.
Well, I thought I didn't think that's the way, and I don't have the text right handy, but I thought someone, the executive committee, or I don't know who, would say the bylaws committee is going to have 5 people or 6 people or 7 people. And then that would be the number of people on the bylaws committee. As long as it's between 5 and 7, we wouldn't just add people to fill out the maximum number. But
let me speak to that if I could.
Okay.
The bylaws do say, right now they say up to 5, and we said that 7 was a good number. The bylaws currently say that the chair appoints. However, with abundance of caution, the membership sort of had a consensus that we should really do voting. We have to make that formal in the bylaws. I mean, but the bylaws currently say that, members are appointed.
But they also say they have to be ratified by the membership after the appointment is made. And Mark has elected, in the interest of transparency, to not do the appointment.
I have no issue with that. Just clarifying what's currently in the bylaws.
Right. So, Bill, the statement is that it doesn't say that the officers can say how many positions can be filled. My guess is we're only going to get 1 application for this committee. Otherwise, people would be here, I think, at other meetings, and it will end up being the 6 of us. But we don't know. I mean, if we have to hold an election and the bylaws have been approved for up to 7 people, and we've got, let's say, 2 people applied, I don't know that we could limit it at that point. If 3 or 4 apply, we've got a real election going. But Michael, you had your hand up.
Yeah, we're just talking about process, and the process is pretty simple. And given given the fact that there was an election before, there needs to be an election now, and it is up to the process to determine whether or not 1 person or 2 person or multiple people will run for that those 2 extra seats having been created by the ratification. That's all there is. I mean, there's no there's no implication or suggestion that it must be 7 or that we need to fill it to 7, or we may not even do anything. I mean, Susan may take off to Puerto Rico, as far as we know, but the fact is it's just a process.
I guess I'm suggesting, to me, the process isn't entirely clear of how many it actually is on the
Well,
committee.
there's no determined number. It's just anywhere in between, and it provides for a maximum of 7, but also requires a minimum as well. So wherever it lands within those range, then within that range, is perfectly acceptable within the bylaws. There's no set number for it to be so. I think it's a good idea rationally, reasonably, because obviously now that we've met 3 times, we recognize there's a lot of work to be done, and we're going to have to divide it up, and we need bodies to do that.
Does that answer your question, Bill? That we basically have a minimum of 3, and we were going to a maximum of 7 should the membership approve that. And then wherever the die falls, I will find out on how many people apply, but I would be very surprised. Of course, nobody thought there'd be 6 of us applying this time. So apparently in the past, they've had trouble getting 3. It just speaks to, I think, the contention that has been there recently. Okay, moving on, because we have a bunch on the agenda. I think I've also been keeping Mark and Jeff up to date, and they're very positive on what we're doing. Jeff has been really helpful on getting all these different things set up, and is very interested in working with us on how to get these changes as we do them put in an efficient way. And I think we will have a report at the 10/14 meeting that will be separate from the approval of the bylaw change. That'll be a separate item, and the election to the committee will be a separate item. I think they're probably going to have an election also for the plans, the community plan committee at the same time. But we will have a slot on the agenda as well, where we can talk about the new structure. We can have an invitation to communicate with us, and hopefully by then we'll know how they can do that, and in a somewhat of a timeline that we're thinking about for their comment. The last thing is, I talked to both Sarah and Mark about having a parliamentarian position. They're both very positive about that until it gets changed in the bylaws of adding that position, which our committee will have to decide if we want to. Mark can go ahead and appoint a parliamentarian at a meeting as long as there are no objections to the membership. And so I recommended Michael for that. I'll be doing a lot of other things at that meeting, and I think Michael would be terrific. So Mark is, I think, planning to do that. So just a heads up. That's not really part of our committee, though. So moving on, any questions on my report before we go on to the process committee discussion? Okay, thank you. Because we are running late. So sorry for taking so much time. So I've kind of broken the process committee information into 2 different sections. One is a report more on the process, and I sent you Michael's excellent process document last night that I think we'll talk about first. And then Tom has done a mapping of the current bylaws to the Robert's Rules of Order format that I sent out, I think, the day before. And then editorial changes proposal that Tom worked on. So it's kind of how I broke out that subcommittee group. And then we can talk about the revisions from the brainstorm very briefly, et cetera. So Michael, I'm going to ask you to talk about your process document, and I'm going to try to share it. And Michael, I also have your structure breakdown when we get to that, your simple structure breakdown to
Yeah,
up here.
hold on. I was just typing minutes, so let me go ahead and fill while I call
Okay.
that back up here. Yeah.
All right. Let's see here. And your document is a PDF. I think we'll go to PDFs.
Sorry to hold that up. I wasn't quite expecting that.
That's okay. I'm trying to find your report here. I'll just do it this way.
Oh, here I go. Okay. Okay. First of all, in terms of reporting, talking, so on and so forth, we use the terms executive committee and bylaws committee to separate it out. The issue arose as to whether or not we're subcommittee and the NCAC is a committee, and that's, I think, pretty well been resolved. That it is a committee, and that is a statewide and countywide assignment, assignation. And so then the thing came up as to whether we're a subcommittee of a committee. And in fact, we may not be, but that's something to be determined, because we are a committee that is actually quite separate from the leadership itself, because we report directly to the membership. And so we may be a totally separate committee, but that creates kind of an interesting little thing there. But at any rate, to the process. Nancy opened up a brainstorming process last time, which is really valuable. And of course, the key to brainstorming is that we don't discuss the merits or the pros and cons. We just simply get it on paper, get it down there. So we have this list of things, regardless of their veracity or their meaning or their import. And that helps, because that opens up the mind rather than opening up argument before the listing of issues. And I kind of like that very much. So the next thing we need to do is to talk about a priority of tasks. If we can imagine or envision what the overall process is according to tasks that we have to do, then we can prioritize them and separate them out and maybe bifurcate them so that we can deal with them in an orderly fashion. The longer I'm serving on this effort, the more complex it becomes appearing to me, and the easier it is for us to break it down into meaningful, bite-sized chunks, the better it will be for us, I think. Tom is most excellent in organizing and structuring, mapping, and so on and so forth, and codifying and putting that kind of structure to things. And I'm perfectly happy with the process he has begun. It is an overload for me, but I would much rather have an overload than an underload, because we can always restructure. So I want to encourage Tom to continue to do that. Substantive changes and editorial changes. There's a hierarchy there. There's a preference first in my mind that we deal with substantive issues first, according to the structure that we adopt, and get it down there, and then come back after we have narrative to do the editorial on narrative, rather than do editorial first. To do editorial first assumes a heavy preference toward a bylaw narrative that already exists. And I'm not sure that serves our purpose. The more we look at it, the more complex it is, and it's probably better for us to recognize clearly the principles and intent of the former document, and to honor those, and to rewrite those so that they fit a more cohesive and integrated document later on. The third thing is to set a deadline for activities and deliverables and suggestions and so on and so forth. And the suggestion is that a single person be the receiver of those, not the arbiter at all, but to receive those and document them and memorialize them and redistribute those. And the suggestion is that go to the scribe. That's me right now. It could be somebody else, but that person act as sort of a clearinghouse of things coming and going out, so that there's an organized system in that sort, and also a memorialization of those in some kind of collective form. Then we do meeting to discuss those changes and additions, and that ought to be free and open discussion on those, and ought to be fairly supportive of arguments pro and con. I am a person who believes very strongly in ideas that are different from my own, because that requires that I rethink my own thinking process. And I've learned through my children and my grandchildren that my thinking from time to time needs to be revised. So I am always interested in other people's ideas that may not be consistent with my own. Then we submit those to the communications coordinator for public dissemination. And I think that implies a certain level of completion, at least at this particular moment, that they are submitted, because we want something that is fairly well put together, so that the membership, not public, but the membership can read them, understand them, make sense out of them, and be willing and able to respond with maybe their suggestions of their own. And that's always that'll be an interesting process, I think. So we receive those public comments, and then we go in and review those. If they are reasonable, if they are appropriate, and if they are consistent with the bylaws draft that we are proposing, then we need to work out the incorporation of those comments into our draft. Then back to the executive committee to touch base with the county, and to get again reporting back from the membership on the process and the content of what it is that we've produced, as well as, and this is important, to interact regularly with the county agencies to get their support. So far, they've been very supportive, and that's good for us. I think that gets them off of our back if ever they intended to be so, and gives us a sense of respectability that we can move forward. Finally, we go to the membership for approval, and then the membership votes on it. This whole process rests, in terms of its acceptability, its respectability, and its cachet, with good, open, responsible, and frequent communication to whoever has something to say, whoever wants to, and particularly the members of NCAC. That's important to me. It's a relationship building thing, and it's also a reminder that we work for them, and we honor their participation and welcome it. And of course, that will certainly encourage further development, further participation on the membership's part in the future. Okay, let's see on down there. Of course, the next part has to do with a broad and consistent reporting on the web page and minutes and so on and so forth. The last part there is a suggestion on a form that we provide the community, if they, so that any input they have is encouraged to be formal, not just telephone call or whatever, but we want to know who they are when they did it, so that we have responsible responses. And the name of that person, the bylaw change, existing wording, so we know what they are wanting to change, proposed wording, and then the reason, the purpose, the purpose. What is this? What is it going to do affirmatively by including this piece into the bylaws. And then after that, what's the reason? Why are you doing this? Did we miss something, or is this an important thing, or is it does it reduce controversy or inconsistency or ambiguity somehow? Or does it open up another area of concern that we might not have handled or whatever? But the reasoning, I think, is important to have there. Let's see. And then I had some questions I think we need to just toss out there to think. Do we do this section by section? And I think, at this point now, I think there's probably a lot of thought that, yeah, we should do this rather than the whole thing. Do we have subcommittees of our own group to work on this? And yeah, I think that's probably helpful. And do we submit it as complete, or do we wait until later on? That is to say, do we submit parts of it for approval, or do we wait until the entire document is completed? I don't have a firm answer on that. My initial feeling about that is if sections are exclusive one from the other, then it might be helpful to send sections forward and do so. And that serves two purposes. One is that it's easy enough for the membership to understand rather than a complete multi-page document. And secondly, it keeps us front and center in the formal business of the association. And that's not bad. I think I kind of like that. So that's where I'm at, and that's the proposal.
Thank you, Michael. And I'm so sorry it took me so long to find the document and get it posted. I thought I had actually organized myself really well for this, but I'm going to continue working on sharing. Can everybody see the document?
I can now, but I was looking for it at the same time because I read it last night. And where did you find it? What email is it attached to?
I found it in my files, but it just took me a while to get it up there. It wasn't on the screen when I was doing a share where it shows everything on my desktop. So I sent it last night, Bill, on an email. So you should have it in your email.
Well, that's what I was looking for. Maybe I already filed it. Was it? So you sent it?
Yes, I sent it.
It's titled 23-9-21 NCAC Bylaws Process Review Beachley Doctor. I think
it was, yeah, and the email was sent saying, please register for the meeting.
Right.
It was that email.
Oh, all right.
So,
all right.
I'd like to
are there
comment.
any comments on the,
Yes.
Yes, Wyatt? Or Tom, sorry.
Okay. I agree with almost everything that Michael's got there, except for the order of the operations. And let me just explain what my thoughts were in terms of the order. Editorial changes, and that's the first set of sub-bullets there is what I'm talking about. Editorial changes are important, in my opinion, to do first because there's some sentences which are not clear. There are many sentences which are not clear. And sometimes it's difficult to discover that, yes, there actually is something substantive in here that might need to change. We're starting with a baseline. We're not starting over from zero. So we have to evolve this document into something that we want. The first thing to do, we're scrolling past where I'm talking about. The first thing to do is to make sure that we understand what these documents says now before we start changing of what we want it to be. And that's my essential philosophy on that. So I would flip substantive changes with editorial changes. The structural changes were basically fairly trivial. I've documented in that one document. So that really, having that first last doesn't matter. But I think having the clarity of the sentences before we change those sentences is important.
Okay. Before we get into that discussion very much, and Michael, I would imagine you probably have a comment about that too. I wonder if we should go back and look at the other two process related items and then come back to the process and revisit some of that. Does that sound okay? Or do you guys want to talk about this right now?
My comment is simply this, Tom, that's a good idea. I understand what you're saying is that we need to understand what we have in hand before we move on. And I'm agreeing with that, as long as that doesn't take too much time. If you find issues of substantial lack of clarity, then we ought to address that first. But I also think that moving forward in reorganizing and handling things in an organized fashion, according to, let's say, Robert's suggested bylaws structure, we're going to do that ourselves anyway. And I think that, personally, I'm looking forward to your skills as an editor to ferret out all of that nonsense once we begin to propose all of that stuff and begin to organize it. You're going to have a task. It's going to be not an insignificant task either. So either way, I don't care. As long as we don't spend too much time messing around with what exists.
Yeah, what I don't see that as being a particularly difficult thing. I've had a fair amount of experience of identifying sentences that are not, shall we say, as clear as possible. So,
well, when we
I don't think that's, I've taken a pass at the entire document now. I'm not saying it's correct. I certainly want review, but
yeah, I think when I think about editorializing, I'm looking at the editor reviewing what we've produced, so that syntactically, linguistically, semantically, it all is balanced out and it makes sense and it follows a particular language form.
Yeah.
But what you're proposing is, let's take a look at what exists, because there's a lot of confusion there, perhaps, and you may want to just clarify that so we all understand the intricacies of what's already been proposed or what's already been written. Is that correct?
that is correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I think as we go forward through the agenda, we'll see that Tom has already done a lot of this as well. So aside from the editorial versus substantive, does anyone have any other comments on this? And we can also revisit as we go forward.
I have two comments.
Okay.
The first of which is I'm going to beg forgiveness for being the technosaur that I am, but I got the copy I got had some red interlineations, and
that is my problem. I'm so sorry. Michael and I had talked about this, and I thought I had gotten all of the edits out of it, and I realized that's, I think, the problem when I was trying to find it. I was trying to find the clean copy, and I did not know I had sent one out with all the editorial changes. So I'm very sorry about that. I will send a new PDF, and in the future, I will just send PDFs out. Let me send a clean copy. I thought I had done it last night and did not.
My printer doesn't print off those parts.
I'm the techno challenged on that one. I really thought it was clean when I sent it. So I just cleaned it up again and took off all the tracking stuff to put it up.
I have one other comment, and that was at the end, the questions that were raised were, I think, appropriate about whether we proceed section by section and whether we divide sections by subcommittee. I'm not sure we can answer those until we get into the documents themselves, until we see really how much revision that we're going to have. But the other question that I raise is, at what point are we able to bring in new members of the committee and educate them, and how far do we want to proceed with this until we have that resolved?
Well, I think that's one reason why I think it's really important that the election happen on the October 14th meeting and not have to wait till December. We need to get everybody involved right away. It shouldn't be a problem should Susan be elected because she's been involved in all these meetings. But if there's anybody else, we'll have to bring them up to speed pretty quickly. I don't think, though, I think that we could do it. I think if we're really focusing right now on the first parts about setting the process, setting the structure, and that kind of thing, figuring out how we're going to do it. I don't think it's going to take that long to bring people up to speed. I do think, I did talk to Sarah some about how we submit. Do we need to submit section by section and multiple times? She advised us to do no more than 2 real updates and perhaps stick with 1 if we can. She said, it's more important to do everything right than to do it quickly. And that one of the things we might want to consider as we're making changes is to actually extend the term of the bylaws committee to 2-year terms that are staggered, perhaps, to not feel like we're so rushed to get all of this done. But I think we're already doing that. We're really trying to get things done correctly and transparently. One of the things that Robert's Rules of Order suggests on how we do these bylaws changes is to go section by section and to should have special bylaws meetings where they're actually NCAC meetings where we propose a set of changes for 1 or 2 sections, say, of the bylaws, and actually have votes as we go through of the membership and information kinds of things of the membership and opportunities for them to comment. That's outside of a regular NCAC meeting, but open to the membership and announced ahead of time, and go through with that. And then we could take those to the county as we go through. But then at the end, we still have an overall bylaws review and approval, because when we change one section, later it might affect a change in another section. So you always want to go through and have an overall approval of the bylaws as well. Michael?
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with that. I mean, I'm not going to stand in the way with that. But with her suggestion that the fewer we do, the better. We're going to develop a formidable document that's going to last, I think, a long time. And if we do it in stages with the membership, perhaps we can break it down differently rather than section by section. Perhaps we could do a first iteration in terms of overall structure, overall titles, and a discussion of purpose and intent and balance and so on. And then the second one be the detail of each of those, of that structure. Maybe that, I'm just tossing out something that might help a little bit in terms of how we do that, so that those folks who do actually tune in multiple times have an understanding of the process that we went through and the process of developing bylaws and so on, rather than this section, that section, that section, and that section, so that answers the issue of what does this section have to do with that one, and so on and so forth. We don't have to deal with it that way. That's just an idea.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And,
Yeah.
and in some way, that's what we're talking about in the terms of the mapping from the existing structure to the new structure as well, when we get to that too.
It may be up to the determination by the committee itself, the main committee, but I see a problem with adopting section by section by the NCAC, because this is the document they have now and the document we intend to present to them have interrelated sections. And you will find yourself, if you start adopting section by section, having an inconsistent document where one provision of the new document may apply to certain processes to the old document and create a nightmarish scenario for the NCAC itself. So I think it'd be wise not to do it that way unless they really want to.
No, I don't think the NCAC cares that much on how we do it. I think whatever we recommend, we can do. And the question is, would we be able to do a entire approval of this entire document at once? I think we could with a couple of meetings probably, but I think it would require a special meetings rather than just presenting at a regular NCAC meeting. So I think it will evolve as we go through as well. Tom and Bill, you had comments.
Wyatt said it well. We
Okay.
basically need to have a whole thing to review.
Okay.
Both the committees, both the NCAC and the county. The county's not going to want to see it more than once.
No, they would really like to not. Bill?
An interim position would be to present sections to the membership, but not ask for approval of the sections, and explain that they might have interaction with others. And I don't know how seriously we want their input, but if we want their input, giving them this whole massive document is not going to be the way to get it. We would get more meaningful input if we staged it somewhat. And even if it's inconsistent, somebody might point that out and we can say, yeah, we're still working on that section. It'll be changed.
Michael?
Yeah, I'm having trouble with this whole area personally. For example, what we present at a plenary session of the membership will have more importance in one area than it will in the other. For example, membership. We just opened up a can of worms about, what are members? Are they children? Are they workers? Are they whatever? And that's an issue that the membership is going to jump in on that. People are going to have something to say about that one. And so, that we can anticipate that that's going to take some time and some argument and some people jumping up, and it might even, maybe even emotions, that's a touchy one. Whereas officers, okay, that makes sense. That's not so big deal. Or how often we have meetings, now that's not going to be much of an issue either. But there are going to be pieces in here that are going to be touchy. And so we have to be prepared for that. Secondly, I shared with both Nancy and Tom individually that all I did was write down the sections, the headings of the existing document, and next to it, the headings of a proposed Robert's Rules of Order, generally acceptable standardized bylaws structure. And the first one was a nightmare. It didn't follow any anticipated sense of, oh, there it is right there. Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
I found that one.
Yeah, you found that one. And you can see the differences there, where the intent and purpose of each of the upper sections are clearly understood to exist in the lower sections, but in a much more standardized and organized fashion. And so we do have a big job to reorganize all of that. And thank you very, very much for those folks who took the time and effort to put that together in the first place, because it's always, always difficult to do these things. Our job is so much easier because we had their work laid before us and their intent and their purpose and clarified. So
So I appreciate that. We're actually moving now into the next agenda item, which is the mapping of the current bylaws to the Robert's Rules of Order proposal. And I like Michael's document here that actually took the spreadsheet I put up last time that had more categories, subcategories within these, because it really does simplify it. And so I think, thank you, Michael, for the work on your proposal for the process, and it gives us something to think about for the next meeting. I think your questions are excellent, and I appreciate the discussion of everybody. I'd like to try to see what we can do to nail some of this down for the next meeting, but it will also continue to evolve as we move on. I think hopefully some of these questions will just kind of resolve themselves, but thank you. I think it was an excellent draft, and I would like to put it up in a PDF form without a lot of red up on the website if there are no objections. Any objections to putting the process document up? And any objections to changing the order of the structural and our editorial changes and substantive changes clause? Okay. Someone was going to talk. I didn't hear.
I just say, I don't think we have a choice but to post it.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so, and I'd like to post this, and then I'm going to bring up Tom's document. I'm going to try to bring up Tom's. So I just have to say, Tom has done an amazing job over the last 2 weeks going through, and I think I sent out one that was maybe 90 pages, 60 pages of all of
Yeah.
editorial changes in a format. When I first saw it, I have to say, I kind of gasped, and then I started reading, and the structure is just so impressive because it's very, very clear. And let me see if I can share without going through the detail. We're certainly not going through the detail today, but and he's
think it
come
was
out with
64
different
pages.
iterations. Okay. Okay. Well,
Because
there may have been
I
some
was go-
earlier ones I didn't share, but
I was
anyway.
gonna print it, and then I realized, oh, I don't have enough ink.
Let me see again.
The one
And
that,
There's
when did that come?
what? Okay. Is that playing on yours? Hey Siri, stop.
When did it
Siri
come,
decided
Tom?
to play songs
no,
on my computer.
I didn't send
Okay,
anything out to the membership. That would be Nancy who did that.
That was just weird.
So which one are you looking for? I can give you the name. Or I could share.
Can anyone hear music?
No,
Is it
No.
just me? Hey Siri, stop. God. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
what-
Here's which
Don't
one am
worry.
I doing? Is
don't
this
worry.
I
not-
can share if you like. Okay.
There you go.
That's probably
Did
not
you
the
get
one you
it?
want. That's probably
That's
not
not the
you
one
want.
I want. Why don't you share? That would be
Okay, now
better.
tell me
Tom.
what you want to show. You want to show the mapping?
I want to show
the-
your mapping.
Okay.
When did you send that, Nancy? You know?
I sent that 2 nights ago, I believe, 2 days ago. And there were 3 documents of Tom's that I sent with the agenda.
You have disabled screen sharing.
Have
Apparently,
I?
you're the only one that can share. So the name
me-
of that one
There,
document
I
is,
just enabled you.
okay.
I hope.
It's not the numbering one, right? It's the other one?
It's the
called
editorial
mapping.
changes.
It's mapping.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let
Okay.
me.
That was, for anybody that's looking, it was on September 19th.
Okay, so we can just go through a little bit of it. Basically, I put some expectations there that you can read at your leisure. But the explanation of what's in the slides is basically you have the original and what my interpretation of what they meant. And then I also added some notes of stuff that I thought, well, that actually seems, that's not something I should change. That's something that needs to be done by the group. Here's a good
So
example.
Tom, you're bringing up the one that's editorial changes.
Okay, so which one do you want? Structure?
I want this. Let's just go to this one to start with. I wanted the one that you mapped the current bylaws to Robert's Rules
I
of
can
Order.
change that right there.
Okay, great. That's it.
Okay, so that's the mapping.
Yeah.
Basically, what I did is documented all the changes that I made. There's an original document which is called Numbering NCAC Bylaws, which is the one that has the red bracketed red numbers. And basically, the only thing I've done is I changed the numbered lists. I put I added the communication coordinator and committee. That's something that needs to discuss. That was kind of marginal. That's why I documented that. I had the subcommittee for committees, and then I added all of those sections. But essentially, it follows exactly what is in the Robert's Rules of Order suggested outline. Got the name. That particular sentences I invented out of whole cloth, so it doesn't have an attribution. But every other paragraph has got where this used to be in the old document. So I've just done rearrangements of the document, and it didn't change any
And-
paragraphs.
So
When you say where,
let me
where you
just
say
mention
where,
these numbers. Tom, I sent out a document that Tom had sent where he just took the original document and numbered it. So the
Yeah,
original
which
bylaws,
is-
and he put numbers in.
So-
And
So,
that's what the red
Right.
Yeah, and
references
you
are.
can see on the screen now, basically
Yeah.
how they were numbered.
Yeah.
And then I've taken those numbers and put them in a bracket there, indicating where that paragraph came from. And someone should check me, but I did verify that all of the paragraphs that were in the original are now in this one.
Incredible job, Tom.
Um,
Yeah, pretty amazing. This will be really useful.
Okay, so I even did a footnote. That was gratuitous, but anyway.
that's great. Um, Tom, you're just, so at some point, as I put in an email, I would like to appoint Tom to be our editor, create the editor position and appoint him. So we can do that at the end of this section if there are no objections. So he has proven himself to be an amazing editor. So go ahead, Tom.
So there's not really much to say here other than the fact that just to look at what's been changed in terms of the order. So it's only ordering of paragraphs. And where I did the whole thing, I just put it here rather than at the bottom. That was kind of arbitrary, but essentially it's completely documented as to where everything came from. And it did fall out fairly easily. There was a couple of things I could say. The communications coordinator position was not real. There was a sentence in there that implied that perhaps that was an officer, but maybe not. So I didn't want to put that in the officer section. So, and it didn't really belong anywhere else. So I put it in committees. So that's the only thing that
And I
really
think
didn't fit.
that's good because it could end up being broken out into
It
different
probably should
positions,
be a committee.
website or newsletter or whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So
And Tom,
yes.
you mentioned right at the beginning there was a section that you just free wrote. Are there any others in here that are?
No, that is the only one right
Okay.
there. And I don't think that's controversial.
No.
But I did document everything that I changed. And that's going to be important. And this is a change log. So at that revision 0, at that date is when I did it. If we decide on any more changes, we will have another entry for that.
And I really like this. I think this is a really important part of this document. It's, is this change log, because we could adopt this structure for any of our documents that we do. We can have a change log like that and change the title. So as we're putting things up on the webpage, it's very clear to people what we've changed. It's a really nice summary of that. So any other questions about the mapping? As you're seeing the mapping, are there any concerns about adopting Robert's Rules of Order format as our structure? Okay, I would like to actually have a motion to that effect then that we recommend to the NCAC that we use Robert's Rules of Order for the structure of the revised bylaws.
I would
So
so move.
I'll second.
Okay, Wyatt moved and Tom seconded to recommend to the NCAC that the bylaws committee use Robert's Rules of Order structure as we revise our bylaws. Any discussion? Okay.
Yeah, I have a question on
Mhm.
just a logistical question, what the committee would like to see. I can maintain the original paragraph references as we change things, or I can reset to this format. I think there's arguments both ways, but in terms of providing a clear path back, I would suggest keeping the original mapping as long as we can.
I think that would be fine, but for the purposes of the motion, I don't think it's relevant to the
No,
motion, but we'll talk
I'm
about
sorry.
that
I
later.
thought the motion had passed.
No,
that was
so
just
all those in favor of the motion to adopt to recommend to the NCAC to adopt Robert's Rules of Order as our format going forward, please say aye.
I
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Now, Tom.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I agree with
logistical,
you. Mhm.
I think it's better to do that. Even though that's our official structure,
Mhm.
we should probably maintain the ties of the past until we make a clean break.
I agree. I think we should do that until we actually vote. Yeah. So any objections to that? I think this is a really valuable document to go back and forth.
So I would like people to look at the order within the meeting heading. I chose which order they are. If something else makes more sense, we should probably discuss that next time. I don't have any, I mean, this is what made sense to me at the time, but it was pretty much arbitrary. So there is some decisions there, but I don't think it makes a great deal of difference.
Okay, well, thank
Can
you
I
very
ask-
much. I'm gonna move us, well, okay, sure, but I do want to get to
Just
the
a-
next one, which is the editorial changes real fast too. Bill?
Well, this will apply to both of those. So,
Okay,
Tom, when you update this with your input or ours or whoever's, I assume you'd make a new version and then we'd see a red line change so we could see the changes?
I propose that we do red line changes for one generation. In other words, I don't want to maintain red lines from the beginning.
Correct. Yes.
Since the last change, this was red line.
Yes. Yes. I don't know that a red line of this format to the original is going to be very useful because it's just
It-
going to be a
It was,
chicken
no,
scratch. But from here forward, then generation to generation, that would help me a great deal.
yes, absolutely my intent. Good point.
thank you. And I think the red line will be helpful for anyone who cares to go into our webpage and look too.
Yeah,
Michael?
yeah, Tom, it would be really helpful if you extracted simply the titles of the sections as a separate document. That would help us take a look at the order.
Okay.
And rather than having to go through the whole thing, just as a headings document.
Do you
I
mean
can-
like the one you created, Michael?
Yeah, sort of that. Yes, yes. And I have no preconceived notions of what that ought to be. It's just for clarity purposes and simplicity, then we can all look at that and
Okay.
know what we're talking about.
In
So,
terms of the mapping, are you asking
Yes, yes.
to have a simpler
Okay.
mapping of
Yeah.
just the main headings with
Yes, that's all.
with the numbering from the previous set of bylaws?
Exactly.
Got it.
so you would,
Okay.
in this particular case, it'd be officers and then the sub with the chairs.
Yes, yes.
And,
yes.
in the meetings, the sub with the quorum
That's
and
right.
motions.
All
Absolutely.
of that without.
I'll have that
without
this
the
afternoon.
narratives. Yeah, great.
No
Thank
problem.
Tom works quick. That will be useful. Thank you.
I will send
Okay,
it to you,
moving
Nancy.
on.
I will
Uh-huh.
send it to you, Nancy, and then you can distribute it to the
Sounds great.
membership.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you for all your work on this. Let's move on to the editorial changes very briefly because we're down to 17 minutes. And go through a couple of examples. And I mean, I love this format. So, by the way, Tom is professionally an editor for this kind of thing. So we are very fortunate.
Well, I didn't ever have to go in this excruciating detail on what I changed because there was a common understanding of what editors do. But I assumed that you guys had never been exposed to that rigorous a process. So what I normally do in my head, I wrote down.
Great.
So basically, this is the original, and this is how I broke it up based on just the logic of it. Having, for instance, this parenthetical in the middle of that sentence made that sentence very difficult to read for me. When I unpacked that, I noticed that "and citizens" was a target for the output of our committee. I thought that was actually beyond the scope of what I thought this committee, the NCAC, was. So I thought that is a reasonable discussion point. So that's discussion points are highlighted, and they are not. I'm trying not to take any particular stance on them. Just that to me that seemed unclear or not what I thought the thing was about. So these are my opinions. Those are my professional judgment, put it that way.
You want to show
And,
another example and then we can
see if there's
move
anything.
on.
Once again, just a matter of breaking up paragraphs to make them make whole sentences out of them. I'm sort of predisposed to having entire sentences that have beginning and ends and more or less relate to each other. The one on district, that's the one that really has the most meat in it. That's now been put into the object, but that's a lot of stuff. Oh, one other thing that I would like to do is when we have laundry lists of things inside a paragraph, those are really hard to read for most people. So making them, giving it the structure of having a major bullets and minor bullets makes it a whole lot clearer for people reading this, what exactly is meant. And that's a sea of letters to me. I look at that and I kind of glaze over.
It looks like a federal statute.
Yeah. This is meant to be much more readable. And if somebody wants to know about making recommendations on that stuff, then they can see, okay, it's these things. Oh, maybe there's something missing, or maybe there's something that shouldn't be there. It's really easy to pick out.
Yeah, that's excellent.
So, I mean, that's the major kinds of changes. And if we went through this just to validate what changes I made, to me, that would be a good pass at the editorial. I don't think it'll take that long because it's really not the teasing out process takes a while, but understanding that the goal of the review would be, does this equal this? If they're identical, then we're done.
Right. And well, then we can start tackling.
Then we
the
can start
substantive.
changing.
Mhm. Okay, so thank you very much, Tom. Everybody, if you could go through that document and see if there are any issues that you see, just communicate that to Tom. I think having more pairs of eyes will
Absolutely.
help. But Tom, this is just outstanding. And I tell you, I talk with him and then bingo, he comes out with something new. I mean, you're just a marvel. And thank you for all that work.
I'm assuming we want to limit our comments to whether in fact it incorporates everything that's currently in the bylaws today.
I think that, if we took it as also a place to deposit, well, here's some more questions. I think gathering up the outstanding issues so we don't lose them wouldn't be a bad idea. So we can always add to both, the changes and points for discussion. Because I'm sure that I haven't caught all of the controversy.
And the points of discussion, anything that you have for that, I would appreciate your sending to me as well to keep for the brainstorm list. Because that's really going to be more for substantive changes. And I'd like to have a separate list for that as well. I think having it in two places like this would be great. So
since this isn't a substantive review, Nancy, I wonder if this would be a appropriate place to take advantage of all the members. And let's just say there's 66 pages here. Have everyone review 11 pages, or maybe have 2 people review 22 pages, have 2 sets of eyes on the stuff, because what we're looking for is the idea of tackling 64 pages and really doing a good job on it, unless we're all like Tom. But I don't think that's going to happen. And
that's a great idea.
Four of you might be like Tom, but I can assure you the 5th is not.
So in the interest of time, why don't we break that up? Who would like to take pages 1 through 12?
I'm happy to do that.
Wyatt, okay. Yep. Who would like to take pages 13 through 24?
I'll do it.
Okay, Bill. Who would like to take pages 25 through 36?
Okay.
Michael?
25 to 36.
Okay. Who would like to take I'll take 37 through 50. And Susan, would you like to unofficially take the rest?
Sure.
From page 51 through 64?
Right.
Sure. When do you want the comments in by?
I would like them in by a week from today.
Okay. Make a little note here.
Okay, let's, if you want that in the minutes, let's go back over that assignment again, please.
Okay. So pages, and I'm sorry that they're not broken down. I'm just being quick, but 1 through 12 is Wyatt. 13 to 24 is Bill. 25 to 36 is Michael. 37 to 50 is me. And 51 to 64 is Susan. So Susan, you have a couple pages extra.
That's okay.
Okay. And I
They're,
think
they're,
it's
they're
64
easy
pages.
pages.
Yeah,
And we're
they
gonna
are.
punish you by being on holiday.
Yeah. Well, she's at working, I think.
I am working. Yes, I am
Oh.
working.
Oh, that's worse.
Let me,
You're right.
So,
let me ask you a
No.
question. No, okay. What we're doing is verifying, is that what we're doing here now?
correct.
So, okay, and that's all we're doing. Is
Right.
simply verifying,
A equals B.
okay,
Right.
all right. all
And
right,
if along the way you see an idea for a
Yeah.
substantive change,
right, yeah,
please email me so I can keep it on our list,
yes.
Well, for
our
instance,
ever evolving list.
under
So-
activities 3 that's up there right now,
Yeah,
at the bottom, it says points for discussion, anything else. So I assume every page would have,
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't
it
know if
is.
that's on every page, but if there's anything
it
that
is.
one of us
Yeah.
identifies as a point for discussion, then
Right.
Yes. See, for instance,
Got it.
this one, on membership, that's got a lot of things.
Yeah,
Right.
And so also I'm saying is if you see another thing, add
Yeah,
it.
add it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And I really have to move on now.
I'll
Is
stop
there
sharing.
any objection to creating an editor position on the committee and appointing Tom to it? Okay,
Like a
hearing
motion,
none.
Nancy?
Sure.
I so move.
Thank you.
I'll
Wyatt.
second.
We have a second. Okay, any
I'll
discussion?
second.
Okay, all those in favor of creating an editor position for the committee and appointing Tom to that position, please say aye.
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 All
I
those
guess so.
opposed, please say no. And I will say I did ask Tom beforehand. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not like, Tom, are you willing to take the editor position? I
Yeah.
guess I should have asked that at the beginning. Okay, we have 7 minutes and quite a few more things. So this is kind of why I would like to extend the meetings to 2 hours, because I think we've really tried to be efficient, but we do have a very active group. I am just going to throw up, if I can find it on the screen, the the organized brainstorm that I sent out that should be right here. I'm going to have to figure out how to share things. Anyway, I sent you an organized brainstorm. We don't have time to talk about it right now, but you should have it. It looks like this. So I took
Nope.
Robert's, you can't see it. I took Robert's rules and put them, or I took the brainstorm that we had last time with a few additional things and put them into the Robert's Rules of Order format, which I will post on the agenda. I mean, on the webpage. But so it gives us an idea of what kinds of issues have already been identified.
Oops, that was the wrong
Thank you, Tom. Tom, you can become our official sharer in the future. God. Thank you. So I didn't change them. I did add a couple, but I just put them in the Robert's Rules format so that as we go through section by section, if that's what we decide to do, we know what we're dealing with. And I just assume that this will be generated, over time it'll change and there'll be things added, etc. So I do plan to contact Alexis Tate before the next meeting and just talk to her about her motions and what the process that we're thinking about, unless there's any objection, and just make sure she understands that we haven't forgotten her and that and see how she feels about this process. So other than that, I think as you're going through looking at Tom's editorial changes, if you could think of this document, I'd like to just keep adding to it so that we know when we get to the substantive changes what to do. Thank you for sharing that, Tom. So I'm now going to move on to, because we're down to 5 minutes, the future meeting time length. Is there any objection to our changing the time from 9:30 to 11:30? We don't always have to use it, but it's difficult to get through all of the things we're working on and still be able to allow for comments from people.
I would object to that. I think that we will fill whatever time is set. If you make it 2.5 hours, we'll spend 2.5 hours. The hour and a half makes us pretty efficient. You noted a number of times that we're a little behind schedule. We're pretty much right back on schedule. If it dribbles over a little bit, I'm comfortable with that. But just picking another half hour, to me, we're going to be, I don't know, I don't want to say wasting our time, but we're just going to be filling the air with more words.
Okay, as we get into more substantive changes, I think we may need that time, but Michael?
Yeah, I agree with both of you on that. We may need more time at some other time, but hour and a half forces us to do what we need to do in a shorter period of time, and that's good. If we do more than that, we may actually even load ourselves down with more things to do. And this is already a pretty wild and filled up barrel of monkeys. So yeah, thanks, Bill. I think that's a good suggestion.
Cannot we extend by motion on a case-by-case basis
Yeah,
anyway?
sure. Yeah, that's right.
So you're saying we should be able to be free to just change the time in the middle of a meeting to be
Yeah,
longer?
if we decide we need 15 minutes more, we can do it by motion.
Sure.
Okay, does that sound okay to people?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, all right, I will go with that. And if we know if we're going to be doing a bunch of substantive things, then we may know ahead of time too. All right, public comment. Susan.
The only public comment I have, I thought it was really interesting when you opened up the can of worms about who can vote. And someone mentioned if people have contracts within Nescoin, and it immediately brought to mind the farmers market that happens during the summer and the vendors. So I just wanted to flag that.
Okay, so that would be something to specifically look at, because they may be seasonal, but they may not live in Nescoin, but they may have some interest in what the community decides too, right? It might be legitimate. So, okay, thank you. I think that's a good comment. We need to note that. Any other comments? Okay, well, thank you for I hope you can go back to sleep for a while. So let me summarize the meeting and action items. So our next meeting is on October 13th. So we have a week in between. In terms of action items, I think I would like us all to think about more about the questions that Michael proposed on how we go through some of the process going forward. I had sent out and anyone who has not asked for a copy of Robert's Rules and wants one, please let me know. I think 3 of you have gotten them so far, and
Yes, thank you.
so and that includes you, Susan, if you'd like one. So I'm
Oh, I
happy
would
to,
love one, but I didn't want to assume because I'm
Yeah.
a public member.
right. So I just need mailing addresses to send them to if you need those. So I also got myself this handy thing, which I'm not offering, but it's like $6. It's Robert's Rules of Order, kind of a cheat sheet. And you can get those on Amazon too, that is more for a parliamentarian if they need it, but it does have some stuff related to bylaws. So it's kind of handy to have. So in terms of action items, I think we haven't really set up. In fact, I'm going to say, could I have a motion to get 10 more minutes?
Oh,
I would so move.
yeah,
Sure.
second. You can do that.
All those in favor, please
Aye.
say yes. Thank you. Any opposed?
Yeah.
All right, thank you, because I would like to set up some,
you can just do that by consensus. We don't need to vote.
okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. So, we, at this point, I think we're looking at the editorial changes. Do we want to start, when do we want to start looking at the substantive changes? I'm kind of thinking we should wait until we get the approval for this overall direction from the October 14th meeting and then go forward. But are
Great.
there any objections to that?
No.
Okay. So at our meeting on the 13th, which will be the morning before, we're not going to be able to have anything that's noticed, but hopefully we can, I'll go through the report that we're planning for the meeting on the 14th. And we can talk about what we're going to be doing there. Think about if there's something that you would like to show. Tom, I'm going to ask you if you could be ready to do the sharing, because I'm terrible at it, for any of these documents that we're going to go through in that report. And I thought we could touch base with the Robert's Rules of Order format and why. I could cover that. We could touch base with the process of what we're looking at, and then show some of the editorial changes and the mapping to Robert's Rules, et cetera. And I'm expecting it to take about 15 minutes of the overall CAC meeting time. That's over and above what the approval of the one bylaw and the election. But we can talk about that at the next meeting, and then talk about any comments on the editorial changes as we review Tom's document. And thank you for that suggestion, Bill. That was a great idea to break it down. Otherwise, I think I'm feeling really good about the input that I'm getting from the officers and from Sarah Absher. I think they're very supportive of what we're doing. I want to thank all of you for your time in reviewing these different documents and coming up with the different documents. I'm just thrilled with this committee. You know, we all bring these great backgrounds and interest. I mean, to have this kind of interest on the committee, I think we're going to be doing some great things over the coming year, and I just appreciate you all. So in terms of action items, I think it's not a lot until we get the approval to go forward on the 14th. So I doubt that we're going to need assignments. Pardon me, and we have our assignments. We do. Yeah. Read the editorial changes and comment, and also please send me any substantive changes you would like to see that are not on the current list. Michael.
Yeah, I just a comment. You know, once we get all of these approvals and we're ready to go and get into the meat of the thing, I just want to encourage that we deal with that by section, so that, you know, we're not dealing with a whole lot of just one thing at a time. And because we haven't done it yet, we don't know what we're going to do. But take for example the whole issue of membership. There are things that we haven't even considered. That may be the most contentious one. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But some things will be a snap, just, you know, piece of cake, boilerplate, blah blah blah. But some are actually going to take some discussion.
Right. Yeah. I agree, and I think that we should think about breaking some of the substantive things down into groups of two also, and bringing them back to the full meetings with some thought behind these different sections too.
You mean for some pre-discussion, you mean raising issues? Yeah, okay, yeah.
Correct. Yeah. The group as a whole will need to look at each section, but at least there'll be some pre-thought and a presentation with those two people's thoughts. So think about if there are certain sections you would like to talk about, because we could do that breakdown. We could actually start doing that breakdown on the meeting on the 13th And then after we get hopefully the approval for our process on the 14th, we could start meeting between the 13th and the following meeting. So we could be doing something substantive. I've also talked to Mark and Jeff about forming an executive board, which is one of the main categories of the Robert's Rules of Order. In organizations that I've worked with, they all have executive boards. And the nice thing about them is it's particularly with the Oregon Public Meeting Law, is that people can meet publicly more frequently. So typically an executive board would meet monthly. And it would, so the officers, committee chairman would comprise the executive board. And they, it would be something where people like, we could give a report, we could get feedback from the officers, the public could be there. There wouldn't be a vote of the membership. So you can't actually make decisions, but at least like the officers could plan their agenda for the meeting, for example, because right now they're having to talk one-on-one, right, to do anything. So they like the idea of doing it. And so that would be something where we would create an executive board section per the subcategories by Robert's Rules that would define who is on the executive board, what they can do and can't do, et cetera. So that's just something to think about. I think it can run a lot more smoothly when you do some of the nitty-gritty planning, and then you have the membership where they get the overall information. So just my thoughts.
I'll have to call you right back.
So at the next meeting, why don't we plan on, assuming that we're going to get good feedback on the meeting on October 14th, and plan to break down sections with people for 2 people each on different sections to come back and discuss. And then maybe at each subsequent meeting, we can take 2 of the sections, say, to have those reports, and membership being one of the very first, because I think that seems to be something everybody feels like is one of the most important things. How does that sound?
Good.
Okay. Okay, any other comments? Okay, meeting adjourned. Have a great 3 weeks and see you on the 13th.